My name is Emily Carter. I'm 32 years old, and for 4 years I believed I was building a life with a man who loved me, someone who would stand beside me, not behind me, when things got uncomfortable. What I didn't realize back then was that I wasn't just in a relationship with Daniel Wright. I was in a relationship with his entire family. And once they realized what I could provide, they decided exactly what role I was meant to play. It didn't begin with cruelty. That would have been easier to spot. It began with warmth. Too much warmth, the kind that feels flattering until you look back and realize it was never genuine. When Daniel first introduced me to his mother, Linda, she wrapped me in a hug so tight it almost felt performative. She called me a catch, told her friends how lucky her son was, and made a point of complimenting me in front of everyone. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have a boyfriend with such a welcoming family. Now I understand what that really was. Assessment. She was watching how I spoke, what I wore, how I reacted. She was measuring me, not as a person, but as a resource. At the time, I didn't know how much that would matter. I come from money, not the flashy kind, not the kind you post about online, the quiet kind, the kind that means rent was never a question and vacations involve white sand and five-star resorts. But I never led with that. I worked hard, built my own career, and made a point of paying my own way. I wanted to be valued for who I was, not where I came from. That illusion shattered the moment Linda found out. I don't even remember how it slipped. A casual comment about travel, maybe? Something small. But the second it clicked for her, everything changed. Suddenly, I wasn't just Emily. I was rich Emily. The comments started subtly, wrapped in fake humor. "Oh, you probably never learned how to cook," she laughed once. "Didn't you grow up with chefs?" Another time, she smiled sweetly and said, "Budgeting must be such a foreign concept to you." I laughed along. I told myself she didn't mean anything by it. I should have listened to the tight feeling in my chest instead. Over time, the jokes sharpened. The warmth thinned. The resentment slipped out unfiltered. "I just don't understand what my son sees in someone so spoiled," she said once, not even bothering to lower her voice. Daniel sat right there. He didn't defend me. That was the first crack. When Daniel and I met, he was kind, ambitious, independent. He took pride in standing on his own 2 feet. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, his mother's opinions began seeping into his. He started rolling his eyes when I ordered something expensive, despite the fact that I was paying. He joked about my job, implying my success had been handed to me. And then came the guilt. His parents were struggling with their mortgage. Daniel asked, carefully, hesitantly, if I could help them out, just for a little while. I didn't even think twice. I covered it. One payment turned into another, then another. Soon it wasn't just the mortgage. They needed new appliances, then a car repair, then money for emergencies that never quite felt like emergencies. And every time Linda acted as though it was expected, as though I owed them. She never said thank you. Not once. I began to feel less like a girlfriend and more like a financial safety net, like the solution to every problem they didn't want to face. When I tried to talk to Daniel about how overwhelmed I was, he brushed it off. "You have plenty," he said one night, like that settled everything. Why does it even matter? That was the moment something shifted inside me. It didn't matter to him because he didn't see me as an equal. He saw me as a resource, something to be used, not protected. I didn't confront him, not right away. Instead, I started pulling back quietly, strategically. I stopped paying for certain things. Let the bills pile up, in their names. I wanted to see how long it would take before anyone noticed I wasn't an endless supply of money. Daniel didn't, but Linda did. Which brings me to Christmas. Every year, we went to his parents' house. Every year, I endured it because skipping it wasn't worth the fallout. But this year felt different from the moment we arrived. Linda greeted me with a smile that lingered just a second too long. There was something smug behind it, something satisfied. The house looked perfect. Pine garlands, cinnamon in the air, soft music playing in the background. But underneath it all, there was a tension I couldn't shake. At dinner, Linda made pointed comments about how hard times had hit their family, glancing at me like my decision to stop funding their lifestyle was a personal betrayal. Daniel barely spoke to me. He laughed with his father, joked with his brother, acted as if I wasn't even sitting beside him. And when dinner ended, it was time for gifts. I watched as Linda handed them out one by one. A beautifully wrapped box for Daniel, another for his brother, one for his father, one for his sister-in-law. Even the kids got piles of gifts. Laughter filled the room as paper tore and excitement buzzed. I waited and waited. There was nothing for me. Linda noticed the moment it dawned on me. Her lips curled into a slow, satisfied smile. "Oh dear," she said, voice dripping with false concern. "Did we forget someone?" Daniel chuckled. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't an oversight. This was deliberate. They wanted to embarrass me, to make me feel small, to remind me of my place. I met Linda's smile with one of my own. "That's okay," I said lightly. "I didn't forget about you." Her smile faltered. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small envelope, and everything was about to change. The room felt warmer than it should have, like the air itself had thickened. I held the envelope loosely between my fingers, watching Linda's eyes track it with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. For the first time all night, she looked unsure. "Oh," she said, reaching for it slowly. "What's this?" "Just something I thought you'd appreciate," I replied, keeping my tone pleasant. Calm, almost cheerful. Daniel leaned back against the couch, still smirking, clearly expecting some petty gesture. A gift card, a passive-aggressive note, something he could laugh off later. Linda opened the envelope. The color drained from her face so fast it was almost startling. Her eyes darted across the paper, rereading the same lines again and again as if the words might rearrange themselves if she stared hard enough. The room fell quiet. "What is it?" Daniel asked, leaning forward now, the humor gone from his voice. Linda didn't answer. Her fingers trembled, knuckles whitening as she clutched the notice. Daniel snatched it from her hand, scanning it quickly. I watched his expression change in real time. Confusion, recognition, panic. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, his voice dropping into a sharp whisper as he turned to me. "Emily." I took a slow sip of my drink, savoring the silence I'd waited years for. "You haven't figured it out yet?" I tilted my head, feigning concern. "It's a bank notice, Daniel, a pretty important one." Linda sucked in a sharp breath, her gaze snapping up to me. "You can't do this," she hissed. I raised an eyebrow. I already did. The paper in Daniel's hands shook as he read the words again. Effective immediately, the mortgage payments would no longer be made. The ones I had quietly covered for the last 3 years. The ones that kept Linda's house standing. The ones they assumed would never stop. The rest of the family was still distracted, laughing over gifts, oblivious to the earthquake rippling through the room. But Linda knew. Daniel knew. And I knew exactly how long it had taken for reality to finally catch up with them. "You're overreacting," Daniel snapped, trying to regain control. "This is petty, Emily. You're seriously doing this over Christmas gifts?" I laughed softly. "Petty? Like deliberately excluding me? Like making sure I was the only person in this room without a gift while everyone laughed?" I set my glass down carefully. "No, Daniel, this isn't petty. This is fair." Linda found her voice then, sharp and brittle. "You think this makes you look good?" She shook the paper like it was an accusation. "You think this makes you the bigger person? You're just proving what we always knew. You're selfish." I sighed, dramatic and slow. "Ah, yes. The rich girl is selfish for not endlessly funding her boyfriend's family. How tragic." I leaned forward slightly, lowering my voice. "Here's the thing, Linda. For years, I paid for this house. Your house. Out of my own pocket. And you never once thanked me. Instead, you mocked me, belittled me, treated me like a walking wallet." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. "So this year," I continued, my tone light, almost amused, "I decided to give you a real gift." I gestured toward the notice. "Responsibility." The room had gone eerily still now. Conversations around us faltered as people began to notice something was wrong. Daniel stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You're being ridiculous," he said through clenched teeth. "This affects me too." I met his gaze, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "Yes, it does. But you made your choice a long time ago. Every time you laughed with her, every time you looked the other way, you chose her." "We're together," he shot back. "You can't just—" "For now," I interrupted calmly. That shut him up. Linda turned to Daniel, her voice suddenly trembling. "Fix this," she whispered. "Talk to her. Make her change her mind." Daniel looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a fleeting second I thought I saw doubt, regret. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Emily," he said, lowering his voice, "let's just talk about this later, okay?" I let out a breathy laugh. "Oh, Daniel, there is no later." I stood, slipping my purse over my shoulder. "Merry Christmas, everyone. I hope you enjoy your gifts." I walked out without waiting for a response. The cold night air hit me like a slap, sharp and invigorating. Behind me, the muffled chaos began. Linda's shrill voice, Daniel's frantic attempts to calm her down, the holiday cheer collapsing under the weight of reality. I smiled to myself as I stepped off the porch. For the first time in years, the weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying felt lighter. I slid into my car, exhaling slowly, but before I could pull away, my phone started buzzing. Daniel. I ignored it. Then came the texts. Come back inside. This isn't funny. You're ruining Christmas. Are you seriously leaving over a few presents? I laughed bitterly. Before I could even put the car in drive, a shadow crossed my windshield. My stomach tightened. Linda stood directly in front of my car, arms crossed, her face twisted in unfiltered rage. The cold wind whipped through her perfectly styled hair, but she didn't seem to notice. She was on a mission. I rolled down my window just enough to hear her. We need to talk, she said sharply. Move, Linda. She took a step closer. I don't think you understand what you're doing here, sweetie. There it was. That condescending nickname she'd used since the day I met her. Never affectionate. Always a reminder that, in her eyes, I was beneath her. I met her stare, unmoved. Oh, I understand perfectly. This house, she snapped, gesturing wildly behind her. This family, this is Daniel's life, which means it's your life too. You're punishing him. I tilted my head. This isn't about Christmas presents. She scoffed. You're leaving a family out in the cold over money. No, I corrected sharply. What's selfish is expecting me to bankroll your life while you mock me behind my back. What's selfish is humiliating me on Christmas morning and laughing about it. For the first time, she hesitated. I put my hand on the gear shift. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to go home. Her face hardened. This isn't over. I smiled. Oh, I'm counting on it. She stepped aside. I didn't look back as I drove away, but I knew this was only the beginning. I made it home just before midnight. The house was dark and quiet in a way that felt unfamiliar, almost eerie. The Christmas lights I'd put up weeks earlier glowed softly through the windows, their warmth now feeling ironic, mocking even. I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, closing my eyes as I took a deep breath. For the first time all night, there was silence. I kicked off my boots, dropped my coat onto a chair, and poured myself a drink with hands that were still trembling slightly. I sank onto the couch, staring at the tree across the room, its ornaments catching the light. This was supposed to be a shared holiday, a shared life. Instead, I felt lighter than I had in years. I barely had time to lift the glass before the front door slammed open. My stomach dropped. Daniel stormed in, his face flushed, his movements sharp and restless. He didn't even take his coat off. What is your problem? He demanded, his voice shaking with anger. Do you have any idea what you just did? I took a slow sip before setting the glass down. I think the problem has been pretty clear for a long time, Daniel. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing in front of me like a caged animal. You embarrassed me. You embarrassed us, in front of my family. I raised an eyebrow. You're upset because I walked out, or because I wasn't the one being humiliated this time. The words landed harder than I expected. His jaw clenched, eyes flashing with hurt and frustration. This isn't about you, he snapped. This is about us, about me. Do you think I want to be stuck in the middle of all this? Do you think I enjoy choosing between you and my mother? I stood slowly, my calm betraying the storm in my chest. You chose her a long time ago, Daniel. That's not fair, he shot back. She's my mother. Exactly, I said sharply. And you let her run your life. You let her run our life. I've been nothing more than the person who pays the bills while you stand by and watch. He took a step towards me, his voice softening just enough to sound reasonable. I didn't mean for things to get like this. But this is my family. I can't just cut them off. I laughed bitterly. You didn't have to cut them off. You just had to stand up for me. Once. Silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. You know, he said finally, his tone shifting, I never asked you to pay for everything. You just did. And now you're acting like I forced you. The words stung more than I wanted to admit. You didn't ask, I said quietly, but you didn't stop it either. You didn't step in when she insulted me. You didn't stop laughing when she made me feel like I was nothing more than a charity case. He looked away, rubbing the back of his neck. I was just trying to keep the peace. No, I corrected. You were avoiding conflict, and you let me pay the price for it. Daniel exhaled sharply, like he was losing his grip on the situation. I don't know what you want from me, Emily. I don't know how to fix this. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized how tired he seemed, how small. Not the man I fell in love with, but a grown man still desperate for his mother's approval. What I want, I said slowly, is for you to choose me. For once. He didn't answer. The hesitation told me everything. I can't, he admitted finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how. Something inside me cracked, but instead of breaking me, it settled. Then we're already done, I said. His head snapped up. That's not what I meant. Maybe we just need a break, some space. A break? I let out a short, humorless laugh. I've been living in a constant state of space for years, Daniel. And now you want more time to figure out whether you're willing to stand beside me? Maybe I do, he said defensively. Maybe I need time to breathe. I stepped back, nodding slowly. You know what? Maybe you're right. Hope flickered in his eyes. Because if you need time to decide whether you want to be my partner or your mother's shield, I continued, then there's nothing left to save. His face fell. Emily, please. Merry Christmas, Daniel, I said coldly, turning away. I walked upstairs and closed the bedroom door behind me, leaning against it as the tears finally burned at my eyes. I didn't cry long, just enough to acknowledge the loss. I knew this wasn't the end, but it was a turning point. A few months passed after that night. I expected devastation. I expected regret. Instead, I felt relief. At first, it scared me. I replayed everything in my head, wondering if I'd overreacted, if I'd destroyed something that could have been fixed. But the truth settled in quietly. Leaving didn't feel like giving up. Staying had. Daniel reached out a few times in those early weeks. Texts, calls, messages asking to talk things through. I ignored most of them. Then one day, I agreed to meet him at a cafe. He looked worn down, thinner, like someone who'd spent months waiting for someone else to fix his life. Emily, he said softly, hands wrapped around his coffee cup. I'm sorry. I should have stood up for you. I should have put you first. I nodded, listening. My mom, she's overwhelming. I didn't know how to deal with it. I know, I said, and I'm tired. He blinked. Tired? Tired of pretending everything was fine while I carried the weight. I paid for your family's house while you let her treat me like dirt, and you laughed with her. His eyes filled with something close to regret. I never meant for it to be that way. I believe you, I said, but intent doesn't erase impact. Silence settled between us. I'm not coming back, I said finally. He swallowed hard and nodded. I walked away knowing I had nothing left to prove. But even then, I knew one final test was coming. And it wouldn't be mine. The quiet that followed my conversation with Daniel didn't feel empty. It felt earned. For weeks after that cafe meeting, my life settled into a rhythm I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Mornings were calmer. Evenings were lighter. I wasn't bracing myself for the next comment, the next request, the next moment I'd have to swallow my discomfort just to keep the peace. For the first time in years, I could breathe. I spent more time with friends who actually listened to me, people who didn't see my generosity as an obligation or my success as something to mock. I threw myself into my work, not as a distraction, but as a reminder of who I was before everything became about Daniel and his family. And then reality caught up with them. I found out through a mutual acquaintance first. A casual comment over lunch. Did you hear about Daniel's mom? The bank finally came by their place. I didn't react, not outwardly. But later, alone in my car, I sat there for a long moment with my hands resting on the steering wheel, letting the truth settle. They had assumed I'd cave. They had been wrong. A few days later, Daniel called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Hey, he said, his voice strained. The bank. They're serious this time. I'm sure they are. There was a pause. They're talking about foreclosure, Emily. I closed my eyes briefly. I know. Mom's freaking out, he continued. She's barely sleeping. She keeps saying there has to be a mistake. I said nothing. Could you help? Just for a little while, until we figure something out. The old version of me would have rushed in, would have fixed it, would have absorbed the panic and turned it into a solution. This version of me didn't move. No, I said simply. The word hung between us. That's it? He asked quietly. You won't even explain? It's not about the money, I replied. You know that. Another pause, longer this time. I really thought you'd come through, he admitted. I almost laughed. I already did, I said, for years. After that, the calls stopped. I heard bits and pieces afterward. Linda scrambling, selling things, blaming everyone but herself. She told anyone who would listen that I'd betrayed them, that I'd ruined their lives. I let her talk, because for the first time, her words had no power over me. What I learned through all of this is simple, but it took me years to understand. Love doesn't humiliate you. It doesn't make you feel invisible. It doesn't reduce you to what you can provide and discard you the moment you stop giving. I spent so long thinking I was the problem, that I was too sensitive, too proud, too unwilling to be flexible. I wasn't. I was just surrounded by people who mistook generosity for weakness. Walking away didn't make me cold. It made me free. I'm rebuilding now, on my own terms. With boundaries I won't apologize for. With peace, I won't trade for comfort. And as for Daniel and his family, they finally have something they never thought they'd need: accountability.